Hello everyone, welcome to Wind Down Wednesdays. I'm your host Paula Taylor. This is episode 208. So it's been a while since I've done a What's the Deal With show. This is kind of an ongoing series I do where like some sort of a topic comes up and it's like, let's just talk about like, what is this? So today's show is called What's the Deal With Angelic Awakening? And this is one of those topics that I could probably do like a whole series on, and I'm going to try to make this as concise as I can, because I'm going to tell you the story of my angelic awakening. And this is how I can illustrate kind of what this is. And along the way, I learned how to help other people with their angelic awakening through doing my own and being assisted with some of the practitioners I've worked with in my own angelic awakening. And it's taken me a long time to even use the word angelic. I've talked about that pretty openly. I was very resistant to it when it first came in. I was raised as a Catholic. I've talked about that pretty openly and just stopped feeling, never really felt very connected to it. But when I was about 16, I started having my first kind of spiritual awakening and just like wondering what I believed, not like what I was taught to believe, but what do I really believe? And that set me off on this like lifelong journey of spiritual awakening. And over the past 5 years or so, my spiritual awakening has become more focused into this angelic awakening. And no one is more surprised about that than I am, to be frank, because I sometimes tell people this story about when my dad was in hospice. There were angels everywhere. They had angels. It was kind of the theme. And there was, it was Casa de la Luz here in Tucson, amazing organization if you want to donate to them. And that means House of the Light in Spanish. And there were angel images and figurines and tiled angels just all over the whole place. And my mom and I both at the time were like, oh, I don't like all these angels. This makes me uncomfortable. And that was in 2017. So you come a long way in 9 years from being frightened of angels. And it's funny, when you have a strong response to something, when you have a triggered response to something, it's usually because there's something there to excavate. And now that I look back on that, I'm like, oh, yeah, I can see why this was something that felt triggering to me. So what I'm going to do, to the best of my ability today, is walk you through this journey kind of step by step, and again, try to keep it concise enough so that this doesn't end up being like hours long. And who knows, maybe this will end up being like more than one episode. But I have a lot of people asking me now, like, what is angelic awakening? What does this mean? What is angelic energy? And it's a great question, because it's a question that I asked myself all along this journey until I finally got to a place of like understanding what it is and understanding what it means for me personally. And the best I can do is kind of tell you that and hope for some resonance in your field as you hear this story. So I could go back pretty far, but what I'm going to start with is the beginning of dimensional frequency expansion. And actually this is perfect timing, I just realized, because the very last episode I did was a bonus episode that I released where I talked about dimensional frequency expansion. And it was the end of 2020, so I always have to think about the pandemic. So I wrote my book in 2019, that was Spiritual Integration. And I started my website kind of right around the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, and then the pandemic happened and everything sort of got shut down and I was furloughed and I had a lot of extra time on my hands. And I started doing some vocal toning virtually, just in a group setting. My sound healing mentor, Trish Devney, teaches these primordial tones, and now I teach them as well. And as I started doing these tones, practicing these 7 tones, I had some really interesting experiences. And I had this sense of these white beings sort of surrounding me as I was singing. And that was a new experience for me. I've been doing what you might call intuitive work for years and years and years, and receiving information and downloads. And a lot of times I sort of hear things or feel things. I don't necessarily see things. And in this experience, I started feeling these I called them the white beings of light at first. They were just, and actually they looked like at the end of the Dark Crystal, if you've ever seen that old 80s movie, there's these beings of kind of white light that show up, and that's kind of what they looked like to me at first, just these sort of semi-transparent beings of white light. And I had a confirmation of this from someone in the women's group I was in at the time. We were doing virtual sisterhood circles, and we would sing at the end of these circles. And somebody said to me, you know, we were on Zoom, and she said, while you were singing, I saw these beings of white light around you. And that was really cool. So I just kind of was like, okay, well, that's interesting. And I don't know where this is going, but I just kept using my voice. This all started for me when I started kind of using my voice more and vocally toning. And then near the end of 2020, I started vocally toning on the show. You can go back to the podcasts from that time and listen to, I would always do the guided meditations, and I started doing some vocal toning in those meditations, and I kept singing the same song over and over again. And I was like, I didn't know what it was. I just knew it was something like every time I would go to vocally tone, this song would come out. And eventually I realized it was the emerald frequency of dimensional frequency expansion. And then Christmas of that year, my mom got me my very first, a little bit of throat stuff here. Hold on just a second. Sorry. My very first singing bowl is above me, and it's a little cast bowl, and I feel like it got upset. So my very first singing bowl is a cast bowl that I treasure, and my first hand-hammered Tibetan bowl was a gift from my mom, and she ordered it from this Buddhist organization in Kentucky, sight unseen, just asked them for a bowl, gave me this bowl, and I would play the bowl in tone, and these white beings of light, it felt like they would like come out of the bowl and be around me and then sort of go back in. So eventually, I was working with a client one day. She came in, she was glowing. I was kind of like, I don't know why you're glowing. Like, I don't know why you need me. I was happy that she was glowing. I'm sorry, I was thinking about like how deep into the story to get to make it kind of concise. But I think this part's important. So my client came in and she was just glowing, and I was like, I don't know why you're here. Like, there's nothing I can do to, like, you're perfectly in balance. She was just like, it was amazing. And, I heard sort of this voice say, first I felt like, I was like, I think we're doing something like a Reiki attunement. I don't know exactly what it is. And she's like, oh, I'm game for that. And when I went down the hall to wash my hands, I heard a voice say, this is the emerald frequency. The emerald frequency is a heart opener. And from there, I started channeling these frequencies that I was guided to call dimensional frequency expansion. And at first there were 4 layers, and then there were 7 layers, and now there's 11 layers. And I talked about that last week if you want to learn more about that. As I was working with this, I realized that I was meant to teach these frequencies to other people. And these white beings of light kept showing up. And I just called them the DFE beings at first. Even when I was first teaching, I just called them the DFE beings. And more information would come in, I think, as I was ready for it. That's how this happens a lot of times. And so at one point, I heard the word seraphim. And I was like, seraphim? And my knowledge of seraphim was like the Sister Act song. It's a Catholic song about triumph all ye seraphim. So that was like literally the extent. I was like, oh, that's like a religious thing, isn't it? That's like a Christian word. So I went and looked it up, and it's not just a Christian word. It actually exists in Islam and in Judaism. And depending on the tradition, the seraphim are seen as beings of light or beings of flame that sit at the throne of God and worship God and sing and vibrate. And at first I was just like, I don't know what to do with this information. I don't know what this means. And I was really uncomfortable with it. And these beings of white light, eventually they were like, well, we are the seraphim. You need to remember that that's who we are. You need to know that that's who we are. And we are angelic beings. And I was like, oh, okay, that's not my favorite. And I just kept working through my own, sort of triggering around that, and sort of, I was seeing how profound dimensional frequency expansion was for people. I shorten it to DFE. And I was seeing how much it was changing my life and how much it was changing the lives of the people who were studying it with me. And I think that that's a lot of how my trust was gained by these angelic beings, was to see the actual tangible results of working with these frequencies. So eventually during that process, I unlocked or remembered my own light language. And I heard this light language all the time as a child. I would hear these echoey, just like sounds all the time in the back of my mind, kind of. And especially when I was tired, and they would sort of echo. And I never really understood what it was. And as I got older, it just felt weird and distracting. And so I was taking the SATs, and I was hearing the light language, and I was like, would you just shut up? I need to focus. And it turned off, and I didn't hear it again until I reactivated it as part of the DFE process in order to get the last 3 layers, or what I thought were the last 3 at the time, 5, 6, and 7. Now there's 4 more. I had to unlock my light language. And eventually I started to understand that all of these layers of dimensional frequency expansion were in fact angelic light languages. And that in fact, all other light languages, people work with star seed light languages, they all came out of the angelic, because angelic just means the realm of source. And just briefly, if you've listened to me much, you've probably heard this, but if you're struggling with the term angelic, I understand it. And from a differentiation standpoint, sometimes it helps me to think more in the quantum. So source itself, the formless void or pure consciousness, that's the words that they give me for source. When source decided to differentiate out, I don't know what I am if I don't know what I'm not. So I'm going to make something that's slightly not me in order to reflect back to me what I am. The first thing that source created using the Om, using the infinite vibration of the universe, was the seraphim. And the seraphim that I work with and am, spoiler alert, are what most people tend to call Elohim. My guides, we do not resonate with that term. That's a human created term. I mean, all terms are human created, but that term itself doesn't mean anything to the angelic realm. The term seraphim does. So seraphim are what some people call the Elohim. They hold the space of source, one differentiation from source, just outside of source. And then we've got the archangels were made, and then lower order angels, and then eventually the order of seraphim, which is what most people call seraphim. They have lots of wings and eyes on their wings. If you search seraphim and read about seraphim and see images drawn of seraphim, that's actually order of seraphim. They were created to protect the seraphim, to protect the realm of source. And again, this is all channeled information. Like, there's no way to prove this right or wrong. I just trust my guides, and I've seen the space with my own internal vision and astrally been there in the quantum. And so and I'm always learning. I will always say that too. I'm always learning. Just yesterday, I learned about a new type of angel when I was working with a client. This happens to me all the time. So it's kind of remembering, I guess, as opposed to learning. So I was working with the dimensional frequencies. I awakened my light language. And then I went to actually a performance by my sound healing mentor, Trish Devney, here in Tucson with my friend Jennifer. And while Trish was performing, the seraphim were with me, and through that performance I had this like visceral understanding and remembrance that I was actually one of them, that was my quantum origin. That's where I came from originally. And whenever I say this, people get into all this stuff about seraphim don't embody, and they're like, people have many beliefs about this. And I know what I remember, and I also know why I embodied, and part of it was to learn about what a body was, because the angelic realm does not have physical bodies. We only have light bodies. And in order to help humanity and serve humanity, we needed somebody to come and figure out what it was like to be human. And that was me. Yay. There are a lot of people also who identify with being seraphim, who are probably order of seraphim, and would call me Elohim. And that, again, is not a word that I personally resonate with, because we don't resonate with it. And potato, like, you could debate. There's a lot of religious stuff around this that I don't care about. My experience is direct. and my experiences of the energy. That is what seraphim, that is what we are. We receive energy, we vibrate, we send energy out, whether that's in the form of light or sound or both or everything. So I deal with the direct energy and then do my best to kind of translate it into human terms that we can understand, with the understanding that, like, we'll never really understand this when we're in human brains, human bodies, what my friend Jennifer used to call dumb human brains. So I had this remembrance that I was seraphim, and it was a lot. It felt really overwhelming. I thought maybe I was crazy. I mean, many times along this journey, anyone who's done spiritual awakening, there's like multiple points in this process where like, am I actually like mentally unwell? Is something going on? And one of the ways you can tell the difference, in my opinion, or at least for myself, is that every time I move further into this, something expands in my life. If I was mentally ill and getting worse, things would be getting worse for me, objectively. And they're always getting better. They're always getting more expanded. It doesn't mean I don't have periods of contraction and struggle. And also, I am firmly committed to do no harm to anyone. This is all a love-based frequency, and that helps me trust this information and trust. I call them my guides. That's the other thing people always say, Seraphim can't be your guides. Well, they're me. We're all one being. We don't have individual differentiations like the archangels do. So I'm really channeling my highest self. And I said this on a recent TikTok because I don't hear people say this. I think for most of us, and maybe many and most of us, and maybe all of us, like when we're channeling guides, that's some form of our highest self. Like if your first differentiation is archangel and you're channeling archangel, that's really like your highest differentiation. And archangels are differentiated into individuals. So you might be, it's like having a conversation with a friend. If you're an archangel and you're talking to Michael, it's just like you're talking to your friend Michael, who is another archangel. Just a little aside there that for whatever reason I was supposed to share. So I had this realization, I think that was 2022, that I was a seraphim. And I was terrified to tell anyone that at first. And as time went on, it became very clear that I was supposed to be talking about this, that I was supposed to be using this terminology, that I was supposed to be saying that dimensional frequency expansion was angelic, layers of angelic light language, angelic frequency, angelic energy, seraphim specific energy, which is the highest form of energy outside of just pure source energy. And I had a lot of resistance to that. The first few times I started saying that in classes, I think part of it was my doubt too. That would be reflected back to me and people would kind of not like it so much. And I really wanted it to appeal to as many people as possible because, again, I saw the difference that DFE made in people's lives. So I tried to use more neutral terminology until I just couldn't anymore. Until I had so much confirmation that I could no longer deny the truth of my being. And now I understand that that's because I'm here to help other people remember their angelic origins. And so just briefly, let's talk a little bit about differentiation and origin, and that maybe will be a whole show at some point. Everything that exists differentiated out of source. So at our core, we are all made of source energy. And as soon as we differentiate out, we become individuated in some way, to some degree. And some of us individuated first into that angelic realm to serve the realm of source. And some of us individuated out further to begin with into things like star beings, into even human form. Like there's a path you can follow of sort of most to least differentiation. And if you have an angelic origin, that is your first origin, because your first differentiation out of source is generally the least differentiated. And then from there, many of us differentiated it out further into other beings, eventually to become human. There are more angelic beings here than there have ever been in history because of what is happening right now, because of the angelic awakening, because of the angelic timeline. This is why I'm talking about this right now. I recognize and acknowledge. So I had a lot of resistance. I worked through the resistance, and part of this, again, was me just like figuring this out, because like there's no handbook to look this up in. So I was working with my friend Jennifer a lot, who is a craniosacral therapist, and in one of my sessions with her, we sort of just determined that I had wings. She was the first and only person I told about the seraphim experience at first. And in this session that we were having, she began, which my guide still, because she doesn't have an angelic origin, and they still don't quite understand how she was able to do this, and they're very grateful to her. She was able to begin to activate my angelic body for me, or with me. Everything's kind of a co-creation, right? So as I started to activate my own body, it was difficult. The wings, like, they didn't want to come out. They didn't want to stay out. I now understand that the archangel wings that I have are really seraphinas, like another sort of version of myself. And I'm more closely tied as the seraphim fractal. So it's actually easier for me to access the seraphim net of energy that moves through everything, the grid, as a lot of people call it. And it's a little bit harder for me to access the archangel wings, because they're not as closely connected to this human differentiation of me, even though they're a form of my higher self. And a lot of it was the resistance. And a lot of it was like, we just didn't really know what we were doing. And in that first session, I remember her saying, well, I guess you have a halo, and I'm supposed to activate that. And I was like, what? We're just both crazy. We're just having some sort of like shared delusion. What is going on right now? And I felt her activate my halo, and I felt everything kind of solidify and stabilize when the halo was activated. So in the meantime, as I was activating myself and getting assisted really beautifully, and trying to figure out what all this meant and who I was, people started coming to me for energy work. And I realized that they had angelic origins, and that they were there for me to help activate them. And so as I started activating more and more people with this angelic energy, I started to understand how to do it. I started to learn, just like with the DFE, it was like I had to call it in through myself and then figure out how to organize it and how to teach it so that it made sense, so that it served people, so that it wasn't overwhelming. I started to recognize that there was a pattern to activating the angelic body. And this pattern holds true for every angelic being I've worked with. Most of the people who come to me have archangel origins. I think that's the largest majority of angelic beings that are here. I've activated a couple of order of seraphim. I've not run across any other seraphim. And my understanding is that I'm the only one who's embodied. And again, I am always learning, and I am... one of my biggest resistances to all of this has been this idea that that comes up for everyone. And I guess that's why I'm supposed to talk about this. It's making me really uncomfortable. Why me? I'm just Paula. I'm just Paula Taylor. Like, why me? That is something we have to let go of. That is something we have to move through. It doesn't matter why you, it is you. And when you start to activate this energy, it's really the only way to be fully effective in the physical plane is to be fully connected to your quantum being, to your quantum origin being. I believe that we are here in this life at this time in history in order to be fully connected to our quantum being, so that we can assist in the shift that humanity is making. That is why the angelic timeline exists. That is why there are so many angelic beings here. That is why, as my friend Bella the horse told me the other day, you need to get over yourself. And it was so funny, because you think that is something you would tell somebody who is like too big for their britches, as I heard a lot as a kid. Don't be too big for your britches. Don't be a little ham. Get over yourself, like, don't think that you're so important. And it was exactly the opposite. Get over yourself, acknowledge your importance, because we have work to do. It's time to move on. And, that message is for you. If you're listening to this, if you're resonating with this, it's time for us to get over the resistance and the fear and the doubt and this unworthiness, and reclaim our angelic origins. And so as I was working with people, I started to understand that in order to activate the angelic quantum body, there's a structure, there's a lattice of light that's related to the seraphim net that is my origins body. I used to call it the archangel net because it's guarded by archangels. now I call it the seraphim net because it's made of seraphim energy, and the seraphim energy is so beautiful. And the closest way that I can describe it in the physical is if you think about those chandeliers that have lots of little beads of light, and there's all this like light and just a beautiful reflection. If you think of billions of those tiny microscopic like lights in sort of a sheet, that's kind of what the seraphim body is. And as that body comes out and sort of differentiates more into what can hold that energy and the denseness of our physical plane, we get what many people call the energetic grid, or what is really the seraphim net. Is we prefer the term net over grid. I think it's just a little more accurate of a description. So when I activate people angelically, when I activate their angelic bodies, and this often takes multiple sessions because this energy is intense. Angelic energy, there's a reason they called seraphim beings of flame. Angelic energy feels like heat in this physical plane, and it can be very intense. And that's some of the reason it took me a long time to activate myself, because my physical body had to actually change, had to accommodate for this shift. And I've had a lot of inflammatory issues that I had to figure out how to treat so that I could keep accommodating more heat by embodying this angelic energy. And so the first thing I do is activate this lattice of light around the body that eventually will kind of extend out and connect to the seraphim net. And then once the grid is laid, that is actually feels more like a grid, or sometimes it comes through as a lattice. Then onto that grid, the stability of that grid is where we can open the wings. And what happens for people with their wing activations, a lot of times they come in and they're like, something's weird with my shoulders. I have this weird itch in the back of my shoulders, around my shoulder blades, or like it feels like it's itching from the inside out, or like I'm having a lot of shoulder tension and I don't understand why. I'm having a lot of shoulder pain. I don't understand why. The front of my shoulders, the back of my shoulders, sometimes down through the lats and into the lower back. And it's because the wings want to come out. It's like they're meant to be extended. They're not meant to be sort of like held inside the body, quantumly, of course. All of this is quantum, not physical. But it's connected to the energy of your physical body. And so a lot of times when we get the wings out, it's like, whew, there's this big like sense of relief, because we've been trying to hold all that energy in the body. So then I will activate the wings, and sometimes that takes some time. Some of us have injuries in our wings, have had injured wings. So sometimes I have to do some healing work on that. So that's the next like step in the process, is to activate the wings. And then the halo needs to be activated, because the halo sort of circles the top of the head horizontally, just like you might see in a picture. Sometimes they show it kind of behind the head. It's on top of the head, kind of circles the head, and then there's like a structure that comes down. If you think about those medical halos that they put people in to kind of stabilize when they've had like neck or head trauma, there's pieces of energy that kind of come down and connect in at the shoulders to kind of stabilize the halo, and then connect into the wings. And then the last step in the process is to connect the wings to the seraphim net. Because there's a lot of energy that moves through the wings, and you need to have access to discharge energy when you have too much energy into the net. And then you can also pull energy in from the net when you are feeling depleted. And I just had this realization yesterday about how many beings are in my quantum body, and the seraphim, this is all part of the seraphim quantum body. And so there's increasingly, amazingly, many more angels getting connected to this net through this process of angelic awakening. And it often starts through spiritual awakening. So the pipeline is usually like trauma healing or spiritual integration healing work into spiritual awakening, into the angelic awakening. And a lot of us have also had starseed lives, so that is kind of layered in there as well. And sometimes that comes through first. It feels a little safer. It's a little smaller energetically to kind of access star origin lives. And then eventually, people just can't deny it. And a lot of times people come to me and they're like, I don't understand what's happening to me. And I came across you like on social media, and something you said resonated, or when I heard your light language, or especially the Emerald Frequency, which is a song, I couldn't stop singing it, or it felt like home to me. These are kind of the ways that people start to recognize. And I'm not the only person doing angelic awakening work. I'm sure there's many people around the globe doing it. And I also understand, because of just my origin, I am holding the space of this timeline, this angelic timeline. So what is the angelic timeline? It's a specific subset of what we have chosen to call 5D timelines. So 3D and 5D kind of split off in the middle of 2024, and then we've been sort of now, those of us who are pretty settled in the 5D, those timelines are kind of splitting off from each other, or they will be in July, in the middle of July, to my understanding, as much as we can predict the future, which is difficult because everyone has free will, and there's so many timelines on top of each other. You know, we have individual timelines, we have collective timelines, things are always shifting. But my understanding is we're going to kind of shift apart, and some of the other 5D timelines will go a different direction. And the angelic timeline, there's a reason you hear me say all the time, for the highest and most illuminated good. That most illuminated good came directly from the angelic. That is wording they gave me directly. And what I am channeling is that this timeline is the highest and most illuminated timeline, and we're sort of tunneling through these other timelines and collecting people as we go. It's a little bit like, hey, would you like to join us? Do you remember your angelic origin? Are you ready for this? Come on with us. And of course, even after the timeline split, we're sharing physical reality, and there's always like opportunity to move between timelines. And there's more and more of us awakening. There's more and more angelic beings remembering who they are. And I believe that we're approaching a tipping point, what some people call like the 100 monkey effect, 100th monkey, is when enough of us wake up, first of all, it'll get a lot easier to find everybody else. And second of all, we'll gain more momentum with our timeline. And there's a bunch of other things I could say about subsets of angels and types of angels. And I think I'll leave that for another show, because this has already been a lot of information. Angels come in all forms, and many of us with angelic origins have had so many lifetimes at this point, including moving into the denseness, the darkness, exploring what is not source in order to decide you want to make your way back towards source. That's really what we're doing, is like moving out of density and back into more expansion, more clarity, expansion, and harmony. And the utmost clarity, expansion, and harmony is source. And so, you know, if you think about this as sort of source exploring itself, like there's a point at which I sure do know who I am, and I've been enough of not who I am to come back to who I am. You can think about teenagers kind of rebelling against their parents and like, you know, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this. Eventually that gets old. Eventually that's no longer serving. Eventually that becomes spiritual immaturity. This path of density, this path of like rebellion or resistance to remembering the truth of your being. Doesn't matter whether you've had an angelic origin or not. Everybody is a source origin being. We all came from source. And the angelic realm is just there to support source. And we're here now at this time to support humanity moving back closer towards source. We're done with the rebellious teenager phase. Let's mature together. That's actually one of the topics that I keep wanting to do a show on, is spiritual maturity. I think that's a good way to think about this, is that the other thing to understand that they want me to say before I finish today is the path to redemption is always available. No one is beyond redemption. No soul is beyond redemption, because at the core, all souls are source. And so eventually every soul will make its way back home. And some are choosing a slower and longer path to that, and that's okay. That's part of the non-judgment that comes from the angelic realm. It's sometimes frustrating, to me included, and to many clients. They'll say these like really kind of lofty, neutral things. And from a human perspective, it's like, yeah, but I'm in a body and this is not as easy as you're making it sound. And from a cosmic perspective, there is no real battle even. We feel it in the physical, we see it in the physical, and it's important in the physical plane because we're all experiencing this for a reason. And from a cosmic perspective, eventually all souls will make their way back home and will be welcomed there as they're ready. The angelic realm is very protected for a reason. It's the most powerful energy that exists, unconditional love. And so in order to come back into source, souls have to clear karma. They have to find enough clarity, expansion, and harmony to make their way through the angelic realm back into source. And that will happen. It takes a longer time for some souls who have moved further from source. And I have seen souls in the densest form, like go back into source, like you're snapping in the snap of a fingers in the course of a day. It's a choice. It's a choice point that we have. And again, the more of us that remember who we are, that awaken as angelic beings and claim that heritage, the more we can assist in other beings who are looking for redemption. And there are angels who also need redemption. And that's a big part of this choice point as well. Are you ready to come home? Are you ready to come closer to your source being, to your origination? And the angelic realm is special in that it is the realm of source. It is the realm that holds that energy. It is the realm that protects that energy. It is the realm from which everything else was created. There's an entire creator branch of the angelic. We call it the Pink Palace. It's this big pink sparkly palace. There's a way station attached to the bottom of that, like the lower, it's outside the angelic realm for safety, but that is the way station that souls go in between lives to decide what they want to do. And you can choose to let go of all of your karma in between lives if you want to. You can choose to undifferentiate as you're ready to release what you need to release. You can choose to stop embodying in a physical body at any point and go back to working more in a quantum space, go back into service in another way. And some of that is hard to grasp from the human perspective, and that's okay. It's as it's meant to be. I'm just checking in to see if there's anything else they want me to say about angelic awakening. Okay, direct channel, just briefly. Remember who you are. If you are resonating with this message, if there is resistance to this message, that is also resonance. If there is triggering around this message, as it was for our human, that is also resonance. And I'm their human. They refer to me as their human. It is time for you to remember who you are. It is time for you to reclaim your angelic body in the quantum so that you may bring that energy to the physical plane you now serve. You are here to serve. And service is not what you have been led to believe it is. Service is not about doing. Service is about embodiment. Service is about being your light self, reclaiming your beautiful angelic majesty. It is time for you to remember. And our human is here to offer tools for that remembrance on many levels of your existence. Remember who you are. Know that you are loved. Know that you are supported. Know that there is no rush, and this is your time. 2026 is the year of the angel, and it is time for you to remember and to awaken. So, if you are looking for more tools, if you are looking to connect with like-hearted beings in what my guides call the Sacred Angelic Society and what I still call the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary, at least for now, there's always a link to join us there in the show notes. There are a lot of tools to help you in your awakening journey. A weekly activation. This one that I'm going to do today will probably be released to the public. So I have released some of those activations for individual purchase on the website. You can go to the activations page of paulataylorenergy.com. The one I'm doing today is going to be the first so-called angelic awakening. Everything I do has angelic energy, but this is specifically for angelic awakening. So that will be released in the next few weeks as I have time. And our community is growing. We are awakening, and we would love to have you join us if that feels resonant. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you next week for Wind Down Wednesdays. Have a beautiful rest of your day.